Okay, haven't attempted a video at the cemetery in a little bit, so we are back over here. I went to the park, and my normal spot had people playing frisbee with the dog, and I didn't find any other good spots there, so I decided to come over here, and luckily nobody's here. I went and sat under a tree, but it's hella windy out there. Now, the first tree I found was at the bottom of this little hill, and the sun was like right in my eyes, so it's like, okay, either I'm going to have to do the video the whole time with the sunglasses on, which was fine, except for you kind of see the sun shining in the lens. So I moved up to a different tree, which I discovered had basically grown up around a tombstone for an infant. That was all I could read on it, was that it said infant at the top. At first I wasn't sure if it wasn't like broken and somebody had just set it there, so I kind of wiggled it, and it's definitely planted. So yeah, so since it's hella windy, we came back to the car, because I wouldn't have had a problem. I don't think the tree or the grave would have necessarily had a problem with me sitting there either, but just hella windy, so we'll just sit in the car. Plus, I feel a little bit better about that when I can see what's around me, because the bottom of the hill, I mean, if anybody was around and needed past where my car was, then that wasn't ideal. But, I mean, although it's the cemetery, people usually adapt okay well enough. Every now and then with this back corner, though, there are old people that get hung up, so I've been here for those instances before. So yeah, yesterday I mentioned that I was going to try to make it a thing where I do videos every day, at least through the 11th, and maybe beyond that too. It'll just depend on how things work out beyond that, because I know when I've done it in the past, the biggest thing was I got kind of obsessive about it, as I tend to do. And then once I got obsessive at trying to make it happen, and it's like, life forced me to back up a little bit so I can have more of a balance of doing the thing, but not being obsessive over doing the thing. Because I have that tendency, like, on everything. It's like, as soon as I get into a habit of it, then it becomes this thing where it's like, I have to do it. And then, it stops being for the same purpose as it was when it started as a challenge to myself. Then it becomes this little bit of an obsession, and that's not ideal. So trying to find the balance of doing and also being able to step back and allow for, like, other messages, other ways of doing things to come up, and be considered rather than just being an obsession. But that's me. And I was kind of aggravated on yesterday's video too, because I went back to that. It was still the focus on the bullshit in the day-to-day existence. And I'm trying to figure out how to exist in that space without letting everything that happens in that space consume me or become just like some big obsessive issue, right? Like, trying to hold the vision for the future that I want to bring in, while also surrendering to the fact that I'm still in the situation where for the time being, I live at my parents' house, and have been trying to deal with what I have to deal with in dealing with my parents, but also in making adjustments to allow myself and even encourage myself to choose a better path. If that makes sense. I will say though, so I was aggravated yesterday when I did the video because it was mainly focusing on the current drama of my dad pulling other people into the chaos to try to cater to his bullshit because I'm not doing my part as he deems I'm supposed to, right? So since I'm not doing good enough, he's going to try to pick it up elsewhere, get somebody else pulled into the chaos so somebody else can feel sorry for him and cater to his bullshit. And currently it's the brother, which is the third in line of the siblings. So I did the video, didn't love it, went ahead and posted it anyway. And I went kind of shorter than I normally do, just because I didn't have more to talk about. And to make sure that everything was loading okay with my computer, because, I've talked about how I'm getting the alerts now that, my computer is currently 3,332% over the space that I have allowable, right? So because I had to cancel my cloud subscription for the time being, so I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to get the video uploaded and all that stuff. So that was a big part of that, it being shorter as well. I watched part of the video while my stuff was loading onto my computer. And then I got to a point where it's like, okay, so when I went to load it on YouTube, it was, it seemed like it went faster than it normally does. It's like, well, did it load to the computer properly? So I switched partway through the video to, to see if what had uploaded on the computer was actually okay, like if you could actually hear anything, because I've had it before where it kind of glitched out with sound or video somewhere along the way, so it's like, I wasn't sure. So I watched it on my computer and everything seemed fine, so it's like, okay. I did not watch it on YouTube because at that point it was like, well, I had to finish loading it for one thing, and then I just was kind of over it, so I didn't. I thought about going back and just like clicking into the middle of it somewhere and making sure that it sounds okay, and everything worked out. But yeah, I haven't done that yet. Haven't been real motivated on it. But there again, I wander off and lose my topic. Crap. Okay, so the deal with my dad. Oh, I know what it was. So I mentioned the past couple videos that I've been kind of aggravated that, my mom went out of her way and got the rawhide back in the house because the dogs need something to chew on. And last night, Taz was chewing on it, and he starts making this nasty noise that he always makes when I know he's trying to swallow a bigger piece than he should, because he goes for big ass chunks, right? It's like, ooh, can I get it down? Yes, I can. That kind of a thing. So, I heard him doing that, so I knew I was going to have to go wrestle it out of his mouth, and I hate doing that. It's so nasty, just with like the gluey ickiness, and it's completely saturated with dog spit, and it's just nasty as hell. And he spits part of it up, and as he's trying to swallow it back, and I have to get get it in my hand, and I have to have like a death grip on it because he's trying to pull against me, and I'm trying to get it out of his throat. And when he gets fixated on wanting something, it's very hard to get it away from him. But luckily, he does okay with drop it. It's not his favorite, and he tries hard to get what he can out of the way before I say that. But even when I say it, he's not going to drop it easily. He's going to ease up on it enough because I gave him the command, but at the same time letting me know that he's also not ready to be done with it. So anyway, I get a grip on this thing, and I finally wrestle it away from him. And like, okay, I had, my fingers wrapped around it like this, right? It was like, probably a good, 2 fists length of the shit that he's trying to swallow, right? So it's like, yes, this is why these things are prone to cause blockages, right? Because his dumb butt's trying to swallow the whole damn thing, and it's that big. But I got it away from him, and my dad had just gone into the living room, and, when I'm trying to wrestle this thing away from Taz, and telling him to drop it, and my dad's in there mocking me. So I had a little bit different of an idea than I've had in a while. So I get this thing away from him, and I'm taking it into the kitchen to throw it away in there. And I stop at the door because my dad's standing at the door, and he was looking out for something, or I don't know what he was doing. But he had opened the door, and it's after dark and everything. And, he's still kind of being a smart ass and kind of mocking me and whatnot. And I said, hey, hold out your hand. And he held his hand out, and I put this nasty thing in his hand. And of course, the first thing I was going to do after I threw it in the trash was wash the nasty slime off my hand because it was disgusting. And so I put it in his hand. And he started laughing because it was funny and he wasn't expecting it. But at the same time, also not impressed because now you got to wash your hands because it's it's like glue and sticky and nasty. He just threw it out the door. I was trying to tell him to give it back to me so I could put it in the trash. Because that's the other thing. He will just throw things in the big trash containers outside. So, if it's a windy day when the trash is getting picked up and something blows out, then, it's gone forever. Whereas I try to make sure it's in the bag so it's not just going wherever, right? I mean, not that nastiness was going to blow all over the place or whatever. He just threw it out the window. I should probably check to see if it's still out there. Excuse me. After it's been hanging out outside today, it's probably dry enough that I could throw it away or pick it up and not have a problem with it. But that was so gross. But yeah, I kind of felt like he deserved that in that moment. And yeah, my mom laughed at it too. So not that matters, but just my little change on the event. But yes, then this morning I was still kind of aggravated, just the fact that it seems like there are some days that it's I only have this shit that's coming back up with my family to talk about. It's I would rather not talk about this all the time. I would rather, be at a different space in my existence where I don't have to, or where it's not consuming my daily life, and thus the only thing I really know to talk about when I have a chance to talk. But whatever. Oh, random side note though. So apparently my mom's youngest sister is getting really into the silly pictures and whatnot, the silly group pictures. It's oh boy, and she found this website that she really enjoys getting shirts off of. And while my grandfather was in the hospital And then also the rehab hospital. She had discovered this website and started getting like a bunch of really random things off of it. One of them had a pineapple on it. Just a regular pineapple and a smiling, and I think it says life is good. And for some reason everybody loved this damn shirt. And so my aunt ended up, okay, because, it was so popular when he would wear it, wherever he was at, whether it's the hospital, nursing home, rehab hospital, whatever. It was always well received. So for Father's Day this year, we still got together with the whole family, because there are other dads in the family. And as a tribute to the old man, she got everybody the pineapple shirt, the sisters and my grandmother. And she, okay, they're turning the other way. We're good. Yeah, she got the pineapple shirts for all three of the sisters and for my grandmother, and they wore that on Father's Day, and it was their little memorial for Daddy and all this silly shit, right? And I was around basically until they started going in with the how wonderful he was stories, and it's like, all right, time for me to leave because I don't agree. And I'm very much the one in the family that was the least connected to him on that, like, as far as everybody else has some sort of good memory with him, and I, like, mine, there have not been good memories. Right? It's been, being made very aware of the fact that he had a massive issue with everything about me. It's like it didn't matter what I did, my existence was somehow a problem. Like, if I was sitting in the living room in their house on a Sunday, right? That's the day everybody is supposed to go over to their house and bond and all that silly shit. I would be sitting and sitting on the window seat, right? So there's this big picture window, and it had the ledge, right? It was more than a ledge. This is a full seat, right? And that was always my go-to spot to sit. And my aunt would sit there, the youngest sister, a lot as well, because usually we were the ones that would be sitting there working on my grandma's puzzles when she wasn't working on them, right? And I preferred sitting in the window because I don't like having my back to anybody in my family. It's just one of those, I don't want people coming up to me. I don't want, like my dad patting me on the back or whatever, or my uncle, this one uncle that was prone to doing that kind of shit too. I don't like that. So for me to sit in the window and be aware of whatever's facing me or coming at me, that was my safe space, right? So if I was sitting in the window seat, or on the window seat, working on a puzzle, and my grandfather was the only other person in the room, he would have to find the thing that was most obviously different about me to comment on. I mean, and you would think that it would be the hair a lot, but that wasn't the case so much. And I think part of that was more that my mom has had moments where she's done, I mean, we don't do hers quite like this, but she will occasionally have me put color in her hair, different kinds, so it's like it doesn't last near as long. But so since I'm not the only one that likes to have the bright colors for the hair, that wasn't the go-to. But a prime example it was there at the end, it was almost always the lip ring. And it was just one of those things, of the most obviously different thing about me compared to everybody else, right? And surprisingly, it wasn't the eyebrow ring because I had that for like 2 years before I had the lip ring and the nose ring. And the nose ring he never said anything about, but I think because in the time he was alive, I still had the studs in it. So the hoop, I switched out like earlier this year, but it was after he'd already died, so he wasn't noticing that as much, but he would always notice the lip ring, right? So it's like I could not sit there peacefully without him pointing out something that was essentially wrong as far as he was concerned, right? Because I'm the one, the black sheep, the one that does the things different, and the one that's a problem, and all that stuff. So I don't have the good memories of that man. And honestly, the memories that the rest of the family shares on occasion, it doesn't really seem like they're that wonderful. It's more like somehow somewhat in denial that he was ever not a nice person to them. And like me and my brother have had this conversation before. It's like with our mom, I don't remember her that was my nose ring for a second. It's on the other side. I don't remember her saying a whole lot when we were younger, but my brother said, she was very aware once upon a time of like all these negative things about him and, how he treated people. But then it's like somewhere along the line, everybody shifted into the space of trying to make him feel better about, because, 33 years obsession over this man's death, right? And essentially him sucking the life out of everybody else because he was so obsessed with death. And like once everybody kind of went to, how much we needed to keep him around and all that bullshit, it's like they forgot that he wasn't really that nice of a person. It's like suddenly they went from realizing these things that were more of an issue and could be seen as abuse at some level if you were like, not trying to deny that aspect of him, which, they don't agree with that idea, so that they don't see it as abuse. But it, okay, like the biggest thing was, okay, he'd always say that as far as the punishment goes, that went to my grandmother. She had to punish the daughters because he felt like a bully hitting on a little girl, right? So he wasn't going to discipline them or anything like that. However, he was not above making comments about, you got a brain in your head, why don't you try to use it? Or, like one of these real hard on the head. And then they minimize it and try to make it something else. It's like, if you actually sit with what's going on here, this whole dynamic is very much an abusive dynamic, right? So it's like the big struggle that my brother and I have had in sorting through things is because we didn't see the toxic system as abusive for a while, because anytime you start talking in that direction, somebody's going to get in your face and tell you you're wrong, right? And so, basically it's like the whole toxic family system turns to gaslighting you to prevent you from ruining the main toxic element's illusion, right? So if, so for any of the things that I've said, regarding my grandfather, there's a lot of it's not been taken too kindly, right? Which is largely why I have mainly been distancing myself from my family more than anything, is because there's no point, right? It's like they're so set on how wonderful he was, and he's not here to have anything to disprove that any longer. So, so they'll just fixate on the things they deem were wonderful and laugh off the stuff that was actually abusive, and that's just it, right? And I talked about last year when, the day of the funeral, it's like, I came over here to the cemetery with my cousins. For some reason, it was a big deal that we all rode to the cemetery in my grandfather's truck. Like his truck was going to say farewell to him or something. So there were 5 of us that were in the truck, right? All the cousins. Well, okay, so the youngest daughter's son and daughter. Son drove. The daughter sat in the front seat. I don't know if the youngest cousin was in the truck with us or not. He generally tends to not be with the family, and especially when his sister is around, those two really seem like they don't like each other, and they spend very little time with each other if they can, get away with it. So, and especially now that she's married, I think he has met his brother-in-law, but I won't swear to that. Like, I don't know any of those details. Of course, now that I'm not spending any time with the family, I'm even less likely to know them, which is okay. But yeah, so I'm wanting to say he probably wasn't in the car or in the truck with us, because I was on the one side, the back passenger side, and my cousin was in the middle and her husband was next to her. So I don't think, we all could have fit because the truck's pretty big, but I'm pretty sure he just drove over separate. But yeah, since I'm the one that has the things to the reality check to say as far as my grandfather goes and the not favorable aspects of it, they don't want me to say things. That little spiel with the cousins was, I cried on the way to the cemetery, but it wasn't because I was sad he was gone. I think it was, I've been crying a lot today and not about this stuff. So, anyway, it is what it is. I cry a lot. What can I say? But like that point, like when I was crying on the way to the cemetery, it wasn't because I was sad that my grandfather was gone. Because if anything, it took him long enough. As I've said before, he lasted 33 years longer than he should have. But it was that fact that's like, how am I the only one that had this shitty relationship? Like, everybody else had something nicer to say about him or whatever. It's like, no. It's like that point of realizing that you were, the main target of the bullying. On that end, it makes sense that I would have nothing good to say about him. But it was just like the contrast with, like, all my cousins at least had something decent to remember of him. And like that was the piece where I cried on the way to the cemetery. It was because I didn't have that connection. And I think it was just that awareness of the fact of like how differently my my experience of the thing was versus everybody else. Now, granted, part of that is from the fact that when I was 6 weeks old, my grandparents got transferred with their jobs out to Oklahoma. So when I was 6 weeks old, they left. So there was no bonding time in there, right? So the most I saw of them was whenever they came up for like holidays and whatnot. And I always, my grandfather, I never had a positive, it's like it's the reading of the energies. It's picking up on the energy and the fact that he didn't like me because ultimately I was a threat to his way of being. And so the way of dealing with me was bully me into submission, right? And for that, at this energetic level, I was aware of this agreement between him and my mother for, the immense amount of shame and guilt they just like dumped on me at every possible chance, or making me feel stupid rather than trying to teach me anything. Like when I didn't know something, it was like, for some reason, they would rather make fun of you for being naive and not knowing something rather than teach you the thing, or what it is about the thing that you should be cautious about or whatever. They would just rather make fun of you and bully you into submission, right? So if you're so afraid of the thing that, okay, like the biggest thing was, okay, so my grandmother is the fourth in line of four daughters. And, she and my grandfather were all about keeping his illusion alive. The illusion of the big happy family. The illusion that we wanted to spend time with each other and, we're supportive of each other. And that's why we wanted to spend time with each other. That kind of thing. The oldest sister, everybody kind of had an issue with her family. That's the family that my cousin, that's 3 days older than me, and took it upon himself to enlighten me, all this kind of bullshit, right? That's the group, right? So for the stories you'd hear of that side of the family, okay, like somewhere around the funeral, my grandmother made a big deal about how, her oldest sister was going out and, having all sorts of affairs, and she would just go on and on about how adored she was, and, the guy she was with just loved her so much that it was okay, and she could just hook up with anybody she wanted to, and he was still at home, and they were, they had a fine connection, blah, blah, blah. And my grandma was talking about how her daughters, one in particular, like around middle school or high school, was basically bragging on the fact that her mother was like this, was like going out and hooking up with whoever, and it was just okay, and her dad was never going to do anything about it, this because he loved her so much, blah, 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 all that bullshit, right? And my grandmother made a big deal about how she had threatened that daughter and basically told her to keep her mouth shut or she was going to be a problem for her, kind of a thing, because everybody knew her mom was a whore. And so whereas that side, it was perhaps overly see, that's the irritating thing too. Like, I sat next to that sister at the funeral. And I think my family just enjoyed the crap out of it when I kept shushing her. Because my grandfather's best friend got up there and was talking about, the stories that my grandfather had told him about, when he, met his wife and blah, blah, blah. And, like, the dog they had, like, there was something with different pieces of stories that this guy had, or my grandfather had told this guy, and he's telling it for the people that are there, and my grandmother's sister's just acting like she has no clue that it was her sister's husband that we were at the funeral for, and she's just like, oh, it's my life, and she was just being so fucking obnoxious and childish, and it's just like, everything I've ever, like, I don't like being around that woman either. I never have. She's obnoxious as fuck. But the biggest thing is, it feels like somebody who was stuck in this broken mindset of needing something outside of yourself to, the idea of, like, okay, so she would have, they probably went to church a lot more back in her days. I mean, she was going to fucking church, that church that we went to all the time. Anyway, it was very much the idea of fully embracing the toxic idea that the church wants or has long been pushing, that women are subservient and are less than, right? So she was, the embodiment of having embraced that idea, and that her sexuality was the only thing that, she could get anything with or whatever, and that sex somehow equaled love and affection. So, like, the whole thing with her I've just always had the sense of, I don't like being around her, or anyone in her family for that matter, but largely it's like you see the wound that she is living from, of this broken idea of what was accepted for at the time of what was expected of women, right? So she's very much the one that's flirting with everybody and, hooking up with whoever. But not because she felt good about herself. Very much the opposite of that. Very much trying to earn somebody's affections. Trying to earn love somewhere, right? So, so then there's one extreme, right? And then there's, my family's way of dealing with it was, don't talk about it, right? You're not going to learn anything. It's better to be... so when my cousin tries to enlighten me, I got like this big heaping helping of shame and guilt dumped on me, because boys can get you pregnant and all this stuff, right? So it's like, there was nothing to actually tell me anything to help me have any kind of healthy connection with why it's not a good idea. It was just making me feel bad for ultimately something that didn't actually happen, but that didn't matter because I wasn't supposed to, I was supposed to, just not, right? Like that, I don't teach, just keep people terrified of everything so that they're afraid to do anything, right? They're just so unaware of everything. They're naive, but they're not learning. They're just taught that it's this terrifying thing and this big scary thing that you're not supposed to have any connection to, right? So it's like, whereas the oldest sister is kind of the one extreme, my grandmother and her family, their means of handling things were keep everybody naive and stupid and just, we don't deal with that. And immediately on that one, I'm thinking about, there was something that came up. My grandfather, okay. The one time that he was home from the nursing home, and they had a hospital bed in the living room, and he came home and was there for, I'm going to say, like 2 or 3 days. And when the nurse came to see him, she knew it immediately, but like my mom and her sisters were completely oblivious to it. Like the nurse walks in and she says, immediately says he's septic and needs to go back to the hospital. So, so she calls 911. They come down and, get him ready to go back. It's like all the sisters completely missed that anything was going on to that level. It's like, they just, the reason that's weird for what it is, it's not really because, of course, you miss things with your family more, but also all 3 of the sisters worked in healthcare. Like my aunt the middle sister was a nurse for like over 30 years. The youngest is a radiology tech. And my mom worked at the heart hospital. She, I think, was a physician's assistant. Very, very briefly. And then she had a heart attack at work one night. And that ended up being the end of her working. But yeah. So they all had experience in healthcare. And just completely missed it. Which, again, since it's family and you're too close to it, then it's a little easier to see how you miss those kind of things. But that wasn't the point. The point was, in the time that he was there, of course, he couldn't get up to go anywhere, so he'd end up, they had him in Depends, but at some point, you'd have to change those, right? And I try to not have anything to do with helping with any of that. It's like, the daughters are okay with him being home and taking care of all that shit. That's on them. I don't want nothing to do with it. My mother had an appointment, and the youngest sister was working. So the middle sister ended up over there, and he had peed all over the place, so she needed help getting him cleaned up. I wasn't helping with that part. I was helping with moving him. But he was being a royal dick. Like he had something special that we would want to see. And he's like, I don't even really, just how he was talking, he was being a dick about it. And my aunt tries to come in with, well, we've both been married. And it's like, fuck that. I said, nobody wants to see your shit. And he was just like, appalled that I would speak to him such a way, but it shut him up. But it's like, then I'm thinking about like the times where, okay, like the year before, he fell on his way out of the shower at like 3 o'clock in the fucking morning, and my dad and I and one of my other uncles ended up in this itty bitty little bathroom that's only got room for the shower and the toilet, because he fell in that space, and we're all trying to get him up so he can get out of there. First off, if somebody fucking falls, call 911, and you can call the fucking non-emergency number if you would like, if it's not like some big immediate health crisis kind of thing. If it's just to pick his ass up, they will do that. They have a non-emergency line where they will, that's something they do, right? So it was always this huge deal that nobody was supposed to ever call 911 or whatever. So it's like, he did not give a shit whether any of us injured ourselves trying to pick him up, he didn't want 911 to be the answer. It's like, well, stop falling. And like the last time where he fell and broke his femur, he was trying to have my mom and my aunt help him up that day. And they looked at his leg and said, no, we can't do this. It's like, why is it taking so long for anybody to make the decision to just call 911? It's like, for some reason, I got to be that person a lot where, hey, I don't want to fuck my body up trying to pick this old man up off the floor. And they made it abundantly clear that they didn't care about how anybody else was doing. You just weren't supposed to get anybody else involved with it, right? So it's just like, even that level of hyper independence and like the aversion of asking for help. Like, when my grandmother fell on the way back to the car after my aunt, my mom, and I had taken her to visit my grandfather at the rehab place. On the way back home, we stopped at this little restaurant for lunch. And on the way back to the car, I was standing on the curb, walking next to my grandmother to make sure she didn't fall. She stepped off of the one curb, because it was the curb. Okay, so the curb I was walking on was like alongside the car, right? So she had stepped off at the one in front of the car. However, when she realized I was still on the curb, she randomly decides that, well, why am I down here? You're down there because it'd be fucking easier to put your ass in the car when you're just already on the ground, or on the pavement. But she like stops behind me and goes to step up on the curb and falls and hits her head on the car. And then it's this whole ordeal where they're not supposed to, my mom and my aunt and I were supposed to be able to pick her up. Nobody else was supposed to help, right? So we have all these people nearby wanting to help, asking if they can help. And my mom and her sister are just like, no, we got it. We'll be fine. That's all right. It's like, really? So we're basically relying on me to exert all the energy because, my mom and my aunt are not real they're not real strong. They're also not real stable themselves. So, yeah. So luckily there was somebody that got there from somebody that worked there. I think he was on his way in for his shift. And he comes over, just moves my mom and her sister out of the way, and then he and I picked her up. It's like, thank God. And then my mom and her sister were even in the car talking about, well, I don't know what we would have done. It's like, yeah, so why were you trying to tell everybody else not to help when you knew we weren't going to be able to do it, right? It is just, that comes down to, I was supposed to be strong enough to make it happen, and they were just supposed to help a little bit, right? No. Fuck that nonsense. Anyway. I don't even know what happened. I was going to talk more about like what's been going on today because like I started my day strong and had like, I spent like a good chunk of my morning with like this meditation time and whatnot. And okay, being in this unified within state, I get lots of like, the visions that play out. It's like there's, okay, so today's vision was being in the space with my counterpart, and we were like in his studio, right? And it was like he goes to kiss me for the first time, kind of a thing. And then there's this thing where I feel myself holding back. And that was the point of the vision, was to address this point of there's somewhere I'm holding back, right? So, so I got to spend time trying to figure out what that is. And so, the envisioning time brings it into my awareness for me to have to work through in my daily life. Okay? So, right. So it's the sense of holding back. The biggest piece of it is because I know I have a very great emotional capacity, right? So, like, being able to sit with uncomfortable feelings, with allowing those to process on the way out. So, to transmute them into something else, right? To make sense of them, to understand them, and to free up the space and, essentially take on other people's emotional baggage and help with that as well. The issue in the family situation is I feel like at some energetic level, everybody was always aware that I was doing that. And therefore it became my job. Like, they just expected that because this was something I do, that they were supposed to have free access to it. So prolonging the old man's life by 33 years that, was basically wasted energy because he was obsessing over not dying, but not for the sake of living, right? He just didn't want to die. So when I've talked about how as soon as I started setting boundaries, which was like December 2023 is when that started coming to my awareness as something that I needed to do. And then I was introduced to ways of helping with that further when I started taking the classes at Inner Path in January 2024. It's like immediately when I started pulling back my energy from my family, it was noticeable. And like my grandfather, especially with his health, like started declining quickly. Granted, it was still, so I start being made aware of this boundaries thing that I need to have 2023. And he died December the next year, right? So December 3rd. So it wasn't like an overnight thing. It was just, I start detaching and, suddenly the things that people were just latching onto that was just supposed to be fixed, I stopped allowing my energy to go to fixing those things, right? So because of that, things started slipping otherwise, right? So, he and my grandmother, it's like they were having a contest between the two of them for a while on who got more attention when they fell and who was going, like, it was one did it, then the next did it, right? So it was like it was just a back and forth with who was falling, who was showing up, and all that crap. But then once I started pulling back and stopped being around, that was a big thing when I went to see my grandfather at the hospital last time. And I didn't go close to him. I didn't even talk to him specifically. I talked more to my mom and my grandmother and my aunts with him present. It's like I wasn't having the conversation with him. I was just there in the same space that he was so they could see that I was there, that I was participating at some level, right? But yeah, so like this morning, so I have this sense of holding back somewhere or blocking myself from, I think ultimately it was the good, right? So I'm used to carrying the dense, icky junk that nobody wants to deal with. But as far as allowing myself to receive good, I struggle. I struggle with that a lot. Like, so I've had these Okay, essentially one of the most important things that I've been doing the past couple of years is holding space for the vision of the best case scenario that I want to work out in my life, right? The good stuff that I want to call in after years of facing all this dense, icky garbage that's been dumped on me. And so that was where that feeling came in at, right? That it was having to deal with it, or just having to face it and recognize that it was there. And like, even, going back to, the shit that I was talking about yesterday with my dad and my uncle, it's like, it still feels safer for me to look to the density that I've had to be working through and working out of my system, and purging from my space. It's still easier to focus on the negative than it is to open to receiving the good. And so that was like one of the biggest things that scenario was, the envisioning scenario was to set me up to recognize, right? So then it's kind of interesting how okay, so yesterday I mentioned that I had that random video come across my YouTube feed, and it was like Hospice Nurse Julie or something, and she was talking about how, what you see of people when they're on their deathbed is what was always there, right? It's like the masks fall off, they can't put on the good face anymore, so that's what it is. It's like, that's what it's always been, right? It was just, they were able to hide it better, right? But I've always been able to see that that's been there. But for like my family, my way of dealing with it was to turn it back on me, right? So I could see the shit with my family, but because, they were acting like I was the problem, I took it on as me being the problem, and then just accepted that. And there's a whole lot of self-loathing that came from that path, but it's like, ultimately, they didn't like themselves, so they couldn't like anybody else. Like, that, there was never an option for them to genuinely love and care for somebody else, because they couldn't do that for themselves, right? So for me to see it and take it on, it became this thing where I was internalizing it, and because they're incapable of these things, then it means I'm unlovable, I'm too much, I'm the problem, which it goes right in with that whole difficulty, releasing the dense stuff and releasing the past to be able to embrace better and invite better and allow better, right? So I've been trying to make it a thing the past several days, of making the effort to specifically call in good things, right? So, it's generally, I surrender to where I am now, and I am open to receiving better. I'm open to receiving what the universe has in store for me. So there again, this has been a few days that I've remembered to put this out there, first thing. So today's first thing is, now I have to recognize that I'm still blocking it at some level, right? So scenario that's not taking place in my actual lived existence at this point in time, but because there's this union in the energetic space, because again, it's, the whole twin flame thing is just another aspect of me that I'm having to balance, the masculine and feminine qualities of myself and bring them into balance to allow for better also, right? Which, again, is one of those, it's just one of those things that I struggle, right? Because, my conditioning taught me that it's supposed to be a struggle, and that you're not supposed to have good things. It's always supposed to be difficult. It's always, there's always supposed to be this scarcity consciousness. It's always supposed to be heavy, dense shit, right? You're just supposed to accept that, be grateful for that, and that's that, right? You don't expect for more. You don't hold out for more. You don't dream for more, which has been one of the biggest struggles on this whole journey is allowing myself to believe that I am worthy of good things, that I am lovable. And, it's finding that feeling of loving myself, right? Because that was not something that's ever been encouraged. And I'm probably going to pause it here in a minute because I got people getting ready to walk past the car. But yeah, so anyway, but going back to that point of how like the universe will show up with things that you need when you need them, right? So that was the kind of a confirmation for where I was at that point in time, with yesterday's stuff and, talking about that stuff with my dad and my uncle and all that. So it was just kind of a, yes, this is what's going on. See this confirmation, and we're going to pause for a second. Okay. It's just as awkward when I stop talking and then they walk past. So, anyway, today it was kind of the same sort of thing. So I wake up and I have this thing after, I've spent some time meditating and whatnot. I'm confronted with it, and essentially that's what it is. I've already unified the two aspects of myself within. So then it's visualizing something playing out, and I'm not in control of what comes to mind. Like, it's just kind of wherever it takes me for the day. And that was where it happened to go today. So then it was like, okay, so now I'm having to face this, I have this awareness now that there's something that I'm blocking myself from receiving, or from being open to receiving. And so this morning, the video that pops up, and again, it's another page that I don't follow, and it was just kind of out of the blue. And the thing that it popped up, it was Lydia Joy, I think, was the creator, and it was something about healing the witch wound, and it was like this 17-minute, basically calling in releasing the lifetimes where it hasn't been okay to be a certain way, to embrace your gifts, and I'm gonna do it again. Because like that's one of the biggest things is, women throughout history have been healers. That's why the church hijacked the whole thing. If the first thing they did was to force women to be in some sort of subservience space and less than, but then I want to say it was around the 1400s that somebody actually specifically came up with the term witch as a bad thing and made it okay further to, bully and assault the people that throughout history have been healers, right? And have tried to help people in various ways. And so, not only... every time I see this damn thing, it's distracting. Okay, I'm going to show you. Not that this way. It looks like the car had a blowout. I don't know what okay, I think that's actually from this thing. Okay, so I got my sunroof up here, which is just so lovely today. Except for it's kind of nasty. Oh, it's definitely still open. It is such a pain in the ass to have it completely locked. Like, there's not a... Okay. So, I got this little button right here, but there's not one that seals it all the way. So when it rains, if that's not shut just right, and it's like, it takes just like the teeniest little bit too much on one side versus the other, and suddenly, you know, whether it's the front's opened up or the back's opened up, because the back opens up like at the angle, and then like the front, if that opens up, it, you know, goes all the way. But I think that probably got wet at some point. But anyway. Yeah. But anyway, so I was watching the witch wound thing. And, you know, I just cried the whole thing. Through the whole thing. There's been a lot of crying today. Obviously. Yeah, and most of it was with that. But essentially, it was like, okay, so, you know, I've talked a lot on here about how basically every single person that is in existence, that's another divine reference point, right? So it's these things happened, which led to this thing or whatever, right? So what combination of events make certain things happen, kind of that kind of thing. Anyway, so if you take into mind the idea that we are all just, you know, divine reference points, and then anyone that has been, you know, okay, specifically, we're going to focus on, I mean, it's not just a thing that affects women by any means, you know, because I've talked a lot about how the attempt to strip men away from having emotions, right? So, you know, demonizing emotions for men and boys along, you know, is one of those things that is essentially assaulting the divine feminine, right? Sorry if I got snot bubbles going now. But yeah, so actually I gotta blow my nose, hold on. Okay, right, so all the divine reference points, the men throughout history who have had emotions demonized, for them, and they're not supposed to express them, and then also the women who have been made to believe that they are less than, or not of value, right? So, you know, and flat out, religion has made it so it is not only acceptable, but encouraged to abuse those that aren't men, essentially, right? You know, but then too, they're still abusing the men in various ways. But they want people to be divided, right? So, you know, so if a man is denying the expression of emotion, that is another level of assaulting the divine feminine, right? So the masculine and the feminine, those are all aspects that we all carry within us, and you know, it's just ways of seeing the differences. Like taking action, doing is the masculine energy, receiving is, and resting are feminine energies, right? But yeah, so if a man is being made to shut off access to his emotional capacity, that is assaulting the feminine, right? The divine feminine, which again, all of us are connected to, right? Both the divine masculine and the divine feminine. So when we come into the earth space, we take on the distorted aspect of both, which is, believing that, we're one or the other and not a combination. So where I've talked on here a lot about being overly identified with the feminine aspect of myself, and basically being in agreement with the system that told me I wasn't supposed to have a voice, and that, I existed for the sake of allowing other people to assault me in various ways, and just accept it because as a female, that I was somehow less than, right? Because that's what the church, that's what religion wants, patriarchal religion specifically is to keep the two aspects divided. That's why they are especially harsh on what I've always called the good guys, which is those that, have, they're not going out of their way to be jerks to anybody else. What they are doing is trying to live their own damn life and not harm anybody else. Those, I've always counted those as the good guys. My brother's always been one of them. There's been several others throughout my lifetime, and I've always been really protective of those types. And, which again is going back to my toxic ex that I married. I was there to help his brother. It's like the situation with my ex, that was to teach me a whole lot, but the biggest thing was I was there to help his brother, because his brother wasn't doing anything but trying to be a good human, trying to be a good uncle for his nephew, and then the kid's mom starts accusing him of all these things because she knew she had to destroy her son's ability to connect with his uncle in order to keep him successfully away from that side of his family, because he adored that uncle, right? So if he adored that uncle and there wasn't a problem there, he was always going to want to go hang out with his uncle, right? But if she could make there be a problem, so the uncle was legally not allowed to be around him, then she could destroy the kid's desire to go over there at all. So yeah. Anyway. So, overly identified with the feminine aspect, but specifically the distorted feminine aspect. And what I've come to realize, like, especially as I'm bringing the two aspects, or as I've brought the two aspects into balance within myself. And obviously it's not a one time does it for good. There's always going to be things that come back up as long as I'm freaking in this human existence, to grow, right? So, facing other aspects. Anyway, I'm overthinking it. The biggest thing is, I think the over-identification was with the distorted aspect of it. Because as I've brought the two sides more and more into balance, what I'm realizing is it's not a problem that try to think of this. I don't know that I'm going to say it right. Like my life, my family has taught me repeatedly that everything's supposed to be a struggle, but it's not. And like one of the biggest things that, I've talked about the dream that I ended up going into multiple times. And like the first time, I was so aware of my anger toward my ex because he was in that space. But I also was aware that my twin flame was in there with, some of the guys in one of the bands that he's in. But then the next, it was just kind of, I was mainly aware of the anger toward my ex, but I was also confused at why he was there. And that's like, I was very aware that he was there in the twin flame, but it's like, I don't understand. Why are you here? Kind of a thing. So the next time I went into it, it's like he and I were able to communicate, but not very clearly. And the biggest thing was, he said, if you need my help, let me know. And I said, I feel like I have to do this on my own. Which again is that distorted feminine aspect, is that you can't ask for help, that you can't, that it's dangerous to ask for help, right? That you have to do it yourself because it's not safe otherwise, kind of a thing. But also, the biggest thing is, the thing that I thought was being referenced was the fact that my ex was in that space, but yet I was aware that he was not supposed to be in that space. But I felt like I was supposed to deal with it on my own. But then the next time, so then what happened was actually a in-person thing, and it was the time that I went to the celebration of life for the family friend that died last year. And there was the couple there that my mom and dad, as well as this other couple, had been really good friends with, when I was little. But it was like June, and it was really hot that day. And there was this canopy thing outside, and they're avoiding me this time. That's a good idea. There was this canopy thing, and the guy was sitting where the sun was like directly on him. And so, because it was hot there, he comes around to the other side of the tent. He's talking to my mom and dad. It's not a problem. He's not doing anything out of line. He's not really close, but his energy I just started getting really uncomfortable. And, so I'm trying to think about different ways to get him away from my space. And then finally, I think back to this moment where, my counterpart in this dream space says, if you need my help, let me know. It's like, hey, so it's like, I feel like that's relevant for life too now. So I kind of throw it out there of, hey, he's making me uncomfortable. How can I get him to go away? And just like, it was just that easy, just having this thought. And all at once, like, the guy starts looking kind of uncomfortable. He goes back over to his seat, and then he starts looking really uncomfortable. And he looks at his wife. He said, we need to go. So it's like this whole thing that's happened within, so it's like this conversation that happened was, just between me and my counterpart in my head. But then suddenly I'm seeing it in my lived out existence where suddenly this guy's uncomfortable and ready to leave. It's just like, so something's to this, right? But then, after I had that experience, it's like my ex in the dream space, it's like he was just kind of a blip. Like he wasn't, my awareness wasn't that he was there so much as, the focus on the counterpart. But it was just, he was just a blip in time that had been there and hadn't supposed to been. That's wasn't supposed to be. There we go. It's like, that's definitely not how that's supposed to come out. But for that's where it went anyway. Right. So like, the idea of asking for help has been such a problem, like, especially with my family too, right? But that's part of that distortion is, like, okay, so as we are all divine reference points, right? We are all connected and we all make up the whole, right? No one person is the whole thing, but the whole thing is made up by all of the people, right? So, like, there's this level where it's beyond us, but we're still very connected to it. So, so what I, like, the big thing that I'm realizing is that it is okay to be receptive and to be open to the universe bringing things into my life, even the good things, especially the good things. The universe wants to give you the good things, but we're made to buy into the bullshit that we're not supposed to be worthy of the good things because religion. And so we all have this big massive block until, it is, as more of us do our own healing work for the stuff that directly affects us, it contributes to what's going on with the whole as well, right? So, so like the girl that did the video on healing the witch wound, right? So like she apparently posted it on October 30th and today's November 3rd. So, I mean, it didn't take long to get to me, and it got to me right when it needed to. And then I cried my way through the morning. But yeah, but like there were a bunch of other comments, attached to it where people were talking about, I needed this, and it's like, that's the thing, right? So it's like, I think the first thing that really made me aware of this specific healing, the divine feminine aspect, was actually Francis Chan had a book called The Forgotten God, where he was talking, it was, basically the fact that everybody gets hung up on the Father and the Son, but then blow off the other one, right? But and of course, because, he's a Christian, or at least, I don't know what his situation was. I don't think I even actually read the book beyond the back, but I had the book for years. I might still have it. But it was always this idea of, there's this other aspect of it that everybody's neglecting because it's Father, Son, Father, Son, Father, Son. Those are the only ones that matter. But why? Because there's this third aspect, and to completely ignore it, what is the purpose? Well, that goes back to the whole patriarchal side of things. And, I wrote that thing, I want to say June last year, 2024. It was basically this, I just had like these thoughts that were running through my head, and it basically, what it amounted to was religion holy ghosting the feminine, because, they're trying to condition everybody to accept that it is okay and even encouraged to treat women and girls as though they are nothing more than possessions, right? They want women and girls to believe we're nothing more than possessions, because if we are aware that there's so much more that we're capable of doing, then that threatens the patriarchy, right? That threatens the patriarchal structures that are in place, that religion and government thrive with, and so they don't want us to be made aware of our power, right? So like that was the first idea that kind of connected me to this idea, I guess. But then it was this book that I had, and I'm wanting to say I've had that since like undergrad. But then like Rebecca Campbell, I had a couple classes that she was doing, mess up my face, where it was specifically healing the mother, right? The mother archetype. And it was like I was around for some of these things, but like that seems, it's like a bigger focus for what she is here to do, right? She focuses a lot more on the that healing aspect. And it's like I tapped into the thing on the one time, but it's like, it's still me making sense of it for myself through my own experiences and through what the universe is presenting me with to help me understand based on where I'm at and what I already have an awareness of, to basically get more of the picture, I guess. Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up because pushing an hour and a half again. So, maybe next time I won't cry as much. No promises. As always, I appreciate you. Until the next time. See ya.